EIGRP filtering. In this video, I'm going to talk about the filtering in EIGRP, and also I'm going to talk about the concept of filtering in all routing protocols. Actually, filtering, okay, is one of the tools that we can use it in the, for example, almost all routing protocols. One of them is the EIGRP. First, we should learn about the filtering concept. After that, we can talk about the detail of filtering in the EIGRP. Okay, you know that in the CCNA class we have learned about the filtering, but about the filtering of data. Let me to review the filtering of data. You know that when one PC, for example PC1, okay, send data, this data can be anything, okay, to the router 1, okay, you can configure one access control list on the interface of the router 1. Here you have some access control entries, and this means that, for example, here you can configure one entry or one access control entry with this rule. If the source IP is the IP1, okay, you should permit the traffic. If the source IP, okay, for example, is the IP2, okay, you should deny the traffic, means you should filter the traffic. Actually, in one access control list we have multiple access control entries, and in each entry we have some condition and some finally action, okay, and after that we are applying the ACL to the interface of router, and this ACL is working on the data means the traffic coming from the user, okay. But here we are not talking about the filtering of the user data. Actually, we are talking about the filtering of the routing updates. What does it mean? Let me to talk about first. Look at here. You know that here we have router 1, router 2, and router 3. The routing protocol is not important. Assume that here we are using one of the routing protocols, okay, not necessarily the EIGRP. This can be RIP, this can be BGP, OSPF, or ISIS, okay. And you know that we should send in these two, for example, route to the router 2 and router 3. Normally, after the neighborship, the router 1 should send 172, okay, 16.00/24, and also 172.16.10/24 to both router 1 and router 2 and router 3, okay. This is the default behavior. You know that we have a rule. That rule is if you have neighborship with the routers, with the, for example, router 2 and router 3, you should learn them the routes that you have, okay. Because of that, now after this advertisement in the routing table of the router 2, we will have for reaching to the 172.16/24 and also 172.16.10/24, okay. You should use the next hop of the router 1. Assume that the IP address of the router 1 is 10.121, okay. This is the next hop. So easy, okay. This is the normal behavior without the using the for example, any type of routing update filtering. This is the routing table of the router 2, and also here we have routing table of the router 3, 172.16.00/24 and 172.16.10/24 can be accessible from the next hop of the 10.131 here, okay. That's it. This is the normal behavior. But now you can apply one filter. For example, assume that in the router 1 we are configuring one filter. This filter is not filter for the for example, real data. Actually, this filter, okay, doesn't act on the normal traffic. Means if the user sending traffic, this filter doesn't work on the user traffic. This filter only is working over the routing update. Actually, when you are sending the update from the R1 to R2, before sending out, okay, this update to the router 2, the router 1 can filter some of the routes. For example, we don't want to for example, send the 172.16.10/24 to the router 2. We can filter this update, and the result is that In the router 2, in the routing table, we will not have the 172.16.10. Here we have only 172.16.00/24. Okay, this is the result of this filter. Okay, why we should filter one routing update? For many reasons. For example, one of them is controlling access to some networks in another router. For example, we don't want to have accessibility from the router 2 to the 172.16.10/24. For reducing memory usage, for reducing the for example, bandwidth usage of the links and some other things. Okay, this is the control for administrator. Which router should for example, which router can send traffic to which network. Okay, this is the control that you can find it with the for example, the EIGRP or route filtering. Okay, not exactly EIGRP filtering. Also, this is the outbound filter. Okay, let me to talk about it. Look at here, outbound filter. Outbound filter means we have this routing information, okay, these two routes inside the routing table of R1, and then we are applying this filter, okay, when we are sending the update from R1 to R2, for example. But here also we can use another type of filter. We call it inbound filter. Look at here. Assume that in the router 3, okay, in the router 3, we are configuring one inbound filter. Okay, I will talk about the configuration of filter. After that, when we have one inbound filter, the router 3, okay, maybe discard one of these two updates. For example, 172.16.00/24 now is filtered in the router 3. This is the inbound filter. Means before injecting these two routes into the routing table of the router 3, okay, router 3 is discarding this for example update. Actually, we have two type of filter, okay, inbound filter, outbound filter. Okay, the difference between the inbound filter and outbound filter is that in outbound filter we have information inside of the router, but we are using the filter for preventing some routes sending another router. Okay, and inbound filter means we don't have any route in our routing table. We are using the inbound filter about the receiving update from other routers, because we don't want to learn all of the, for example, that updates. You can use inbound filter or outbound filter. This is the generic topic, generic concept of the filtering. This is not exactly EIGRP filtering. You can use this concept in all of the routing protocols, but in each routing protocol we have some considerations, some special for example conditions. For example, in OSPF we have some condition, in EIGRP we have some other conditions, some other tools. Okay, but in generic we can say that the concept of filtering in the about the routing update filtering means we can filter, we can discard some of the routing update information from sending to one neighbor or from receiving from one neighbor. Okay, this is the filtering. After that, it is so important to, for example, notice the difference between the data filtering and routing update filtering. Actually, here we don't apply, for example, the ACL to one interface. If you apply ACL to one interface, this means that you want to filter data. But for example, if you want to configure ACL for the filter of one protocol, you shouldn't apply the ACL to the interface. You should apply the ACL, for example, to the routing protocol. Okay, you will learn about them, but for now let me to emphasize that you should consider every time, you should notice every time to the difference between the data filtering and also routing update filtering. Okay, now let me to talk about the EIGRP filtering. Specifically in the EIGRP, okay, we can use three tools for the filtering. The first is access control list. Actually, access control list, or the ACL, is a tool that we can use it to the data filtering and also routing update filtering. Okay, here we are using the ACL for the routing update filtering. About the ACL you have learned in the CCNA class. Because of that, here only we are using the ACL for the filtering. But After that, we have another tool. The name of this tool is the IP prefix list. I think this is the first time that you are hearing about the IP prefix list. Because of that, we should first learn about the IP prefix list, and after that we can talk about the usage of the IP prefix list in the EIGRP filtering. Let me to say that with the ACL, okay, you can filter both data and routing update. Actually, this when you are applying the ACL to one interface, that is working for data filtering, and when you are apply the ACL to the routing protocol, the ACL is working for the routing update filtering. But with the IP prefix list, okay, about the filtering, you can filter only the routing update, but this is a powerful tools for routing update filtering, more powerful than the ACL. ACL actually